I was at an event the other day and I had a conversation with someone in which they referred to climate change as an issue impacting future generations. I thought that was an interesting take on the subject, so that's what I want to broach here today. Apologies if the wind causes any audio problems today. It is again very windy here. The 19th of July 2022 was an extraordinary day. It's certainly one that stands out in my memory. We had received weather warnings for several days beforehand regarding extreme temperatures. Sure enough, by the end of that day, we had recorded the highest ever UK temperature, namely 40.3 degrees Celsius, recorded at Coningsby in Lincolnshire. This was the first time a UK temperature had ever exceeded 40 degrees, and it beat the previous national record by 1.6 degrees. We need to be very careful when talking about weather extremes. Weather is not the same as the climate, and extremes of weather have always happened. So we cannot point to any single extreme and say that it is caused by climate change. However, it is not unreasonable to look for patterns in the extremes we are getting and whether they seem to be getting more frequent. Sure enough, as with other extremes, there is a trend in the maximum temperatures we are seeing. If we look at the hottest temperatures recorded in the UK, the top 10 for example, it is notable that 7 of them have occurred since the year 2000, with another 2 of them having been in 1990. Prior to that, we have to go back to 1911 to see the next hottest day, the previous extreme. On that day in 2022, not only did we exceed the record for the hottest day anywhere in the UK, but Coningsby beat the previous record in that particular area by an extraordinary 5.5 degrees Celsius. Indeed, 46 separate weather stations exceeded their previous records, with a surprising number breaking them by more than 4 degrees. That day also broke the record for the highest daily minimum temperature, as the thermometer didn't drop below 26.8 degrees Celsius overnight at Sherburn Model Farm in Oxfordshire. So what, I hear you ask? What's the problem with a hot day? It is, after all, much hotter in other parts of the world, and they cope well enough. The concern is that people in hotter climes have adapted their way of life to enable them to cope in a way that we have not. We have yet to create ourselves ways to escape the heat here in the UK. We do not have techniques and infrastructure we can use to help us stay cool in those conditions, and that causes these events to be very dangerous. The government's Heat Mortality Monitoring Report 2022 estimates that there were roughly 3,000 excess deaths caused by the 5 heat episodes which occurred that summer, the highest number of excess deaths caused by heat ever recorded in a single year. We can, of course, adapt. We can learn from the techniques that others have developed in hotter parts of the world. But there is an expense to doing so, as is always the case with adaptation. But this is, to some extent, a cost we have brought upon ourselves by our inaction on climate issues so far. And this is just the tip of the rapidly melting iceberg, as it were, just a small part of the cost if we do nothing to limit climate change at all. Bear in mind that I have talked about only one extreme so far. The problem climate change causes is that all of the extremes become much more likely to occur. We can expect both droughts and floods, hotter and colder temperatures, more frequent storms and higher winds, not to mention more pressure on food and water supplies, even here in the UK. It is certainly true to say that future generations will suffer from climate change, and that the effects that they will have to deal with are many and varied. But we will all be impacted, as those effects are happening earlier than was anticipated. They are already becoming noticeable. By changing our ways in the next few years, we can help to minimise the impact on ourselves, no matter what age we are. Older generations can be more resistant to making changes. They are less willing to learn new ways of living. Yet they are the most vulnerable to the effects of the extremes we will encounter, so everyone will find themselves on this journey one way or another. In the next decade, we're going to have to make some changes to how we live. Many changes will be outside our direct control, such as how some industrial processes and commercial activities are carried out. However, some of the changes are for us to make. Each of us will have to do our bit to resolve issues in three broad areas, namely how we travel, with EVs being one option, how we heat our homes, with heat pumps offering a very efficient solution in many cases, and what we eat, as moving our diets to be more plant-based makes a big difference as well. Getting solar is also something that would help. However, the switch to renewable energy generation is being done at a national level on our behalf. So if finances do not permit it, then concentrate instead on those other three: transport, heating and diet. The good news is that we have the solutions we need to do what must be done, and all we have to do is learn about them and then start to work them into our lives. Don't worry, there is nothing too scary to deal with here, and making these changes will be less disruptive than what will happen if we do not change. Embracing the switch is the easier of the two options open to us. Thanks very much for joining me. Your questions and comments on this subject are most welcome as ever. If you've liked the video, then it's a help to me if you click the thumbs up button. That tells YouTube that you've enjoyed it, and YouTube may promote it to others based upon that. And of course, click subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks.